I live a few hundred feet from a main road, right in the woods. I bought the house a few years prior, but I love it. On one hand, there is the peace associated with not having neighbors, since the closest one is further into the woods. On the other hand, the forest gets unsettling, especially at night. One night, I was with my wife, let's call her Lexi, having dinner in the living room. It was already turning night when suddenly there was a knock on the door. I thought it was one of my neighbors, so I opened it. When I did, I noticed that the person was not my neighbor, at least none that I knew of. It was a man, and he seemed nervous at first glance. He apologized for interrupting whatever I was doing and asked me if I could help him with something. I said, "Sure, what is it?" He hesitated at first, but then told me that his car had broken down on the main road and asked if I could follow him there. I agreed and followed him. We walked for around 3 minutes until we finally turned onto the main road. I could already see the vehicle from afar, so I kept going, following the stranger. On the way there, the man and I talked normally, and he seemed to be a genuine guy. When we arrived at the car, I noticed that it was a gray Honda Accord from the 2000s. I asked him if he could open the hood, just so I could see if there was something amiss with the engine or any other part. I'm not a mechanic, nor claim to be, but my dad was, and I gained some knowledge from him when I was young. I asked him what was wrong with the car, and he told me that the engine light had turned on, and the car jolted to a stop. While I was trying to find what the problem was, I got a call from my wife. She had trouble falling asleep, so by the time it took for me and the guy to arrive at the car, it was already night out, and I was sure she was already in bed. I was correct. She called me and told me to be quiet and to stop making so much noise downstairs. I froze. There was someone in the house, and it was not me. I started running back to my house, and the guy started chasing me as soon as I took off. Still on the phone, I told my wife that it was not me downstairs and yelled for her to lock herself in the bedroom. I hung up and tried to put my phone in my pocket, but as soon as I dropped it, it fell to the floor. I kept running, and eventually, I was outside my house. I looked back, but didn't see the guy chasing me, so I went directly to the garage where I kept my shotgun. I went inside and saw a masked man robbing the entire place. I pointed the gun at him and encouraged him to get out, or I would shoot him. He got out of the house from the back door while I was still pointing the gun at him. After he left, I made sure the house was clear and locked all the doors. I went upstairs and came across my wife inside our locked bedroom. I told her what happened, including the fact that I was chased and accidentally dropped my phone on the floor. She insisted we call the police, but I told her that I would do it tomorrow morning, when everything would be calmer. We went to sleep at around 11 p.m., still without my phone. I got woken up by my wife a few hours later, with her saying that she heard a thud coming from downstairs. I was going to investigate, but my wife stopped me, stating that it could be the same people from earlier. So I opened her phone and went to the Find My iPhone app and proceeded to log in with my Apple ID. I'm not lying when I say this. My phone was at our house. It was the people from earlier. I quietly went to the bedroom door and locked it. Seconds after locking it, I heard the bathroom door, which was directly in front of the bedroom door, open. We were actually being robbed for the second time of the day. My wife whispered, asking me to get the shotgun, but that's when it hit me. I left it downstairs. My wife immediately called the police, but while she was doing it, the doorknob to the bedroom turned. Luckily, it was locked. Then, a man started yelling, saying that they knew we were here, and if we didn't want the worst to happen, we'd better open the door. My wife started crying, panicking, while I had to find a solution for this. I thought of being quiet, just so they thought no one was here, but they definitely heard my wife crying, so that would not work. We then decided to jump out the window since the fall was not that high. We jumped and ended up with some bruises. After jumping and running out through the yard, I heard shots, probably coming in our direction. We kept running, and eventually saw a police car coming toward us. We explained what happened and that the intruders were still inside. 3 officers went in, while the others stayed with us outside. 5 minutes later, they came back with the 2 intruders handcuffed. I recognized one of them to be the same guy from earlier, the one that knocked on the door asking for help. The man later confessed to the police that he owed money to the individual who was with him and had robbed us in the first place. He explained that he had to lead me into the trap while the first robbery took place, as he had been threatened with harm or even death if he didn't comply. I work as a plumber, so I often travel a lot to people's houses. On my way to the office, after leaving a client's house, I took the wrong road and accidentally put myself on a dirt path surrounded by forest. I didn't want to just turn back, so I kept going, hoping that it would lead to the main road. Maybe it was a shortcut that I didn't know of. My company's vehicle, the one I was driving, had a problem with the gas indicator. It would sometimes say that it was full when it was almost empty. A few miles onto the dirt road, the car started stuttering, and I was in the middle of who knows where. I kept pushing the car until it stopped. I couldn't tell why it stopped, though I was almost sure it was because it ran out of gas. I got out and it was freezing cold outside. I wanted to ask for help, but there was obviously no one around, so I tried calling, but my phone had just died. I sat on the car seat with the door open, thinking of what to do, when I started hearing a bell from afar. I went outside and noticed that it was not a single bell, but multiple. Minutes passed, and I saw sheep roaming around. That's where I must have heard the bells. Right next to them, there was a shepherd. A few more minutes passed, and the shepherd walked through the path to the other side of the forest. I asked him for help, and he slowly approached my car with his sheep. He asked me what was happening, and I told him that my car had run out of gas. He told me to wait for a little bit while he goes to his house and calls a tow truck company. Hours passed. I didn't have my phone charged, nor my car battery would work. And still, no help had arrived until I saw a pair of headlights in the rearview mirror. Finally, the tow truck had arrived. I left my car to greet the driver and help him tow my van if needed. That's when I noticed the vehicle that parked just behind me was not the tow truck. It was a regular car. I thought that the old shepherd had called for a friend's help instead of a tow truck, so I asked the driver if that was the case. He agreed and asked me if I was alone. I lied, saying that I was with my friends, and he started looking inside the van. He didn't see them inside, so I told him that they were taking a piss in the woods. He seemed to believe me and asked me to open the hood. I went inside and pulled the lever. He told me he knew what the problem was and told me how to fix it. Apparently, it was some little piece that was broken. However, he told me that he only had the piece in his auto repair shop, which was not close, so I had to get in his car and go with him. After getting the piece, I would call an Uber back to my car, since I was already taught how to fix it. This was his plan. I wasn't going inside a stranger's car, so I denied. His expression changed immediately. He started getting angry and asked me where my friends were. I was scared I was about to die when another pair of headlights appeared in front of my van. I ran into the woods, hoping not to be chased by anyone from either of the cars. Then, the approaching vehicle started honking, and I saw that it was a tow truck. I ran to greet the driver, asking him for help. He asked what was happening, and I quickly explained that the man on that car wanted to kill me. While I was explaining, I saw the man leaving the area in his car. The tow truck driver, whom I later found out was named Joel, towed the van and probably saved my life. I later found out that the old shepherd called a tow truck, but it just took a long time to arrive. The man who wanted me to enter his car was probably just a random guy who took the same route as me, but did not have good intentions. At the time of this story, which happened in 1992, my main vehicle was an old pickup truck. I got it from my uncle a few years earlier as a birthday gift. Don't think it was brand new at the time because it was not. It was inherited from my grandpa to my uncle when he passed away, and my uncle gave it to me. Although the truck was not great, it was my first vehicle, which I saw as a big win. I worked at a gas station, which was far from my house, around 20 minutes to be exact. I was planning on changing my job because I worked at night there, and from time to time, I didn't feel safe being there alone. One night, about a week after receiving the pickup truck, I was going to work. As I worked the night shift, I left my house at around 10:45 p.m. When I was about 5 minutes away from the gas station, my truck started braking, engine braking, just like when you downshift at high RPMs. For context, the road was surrounded by a forest on both sides. I stopped just so I didn't mess up the engine even more. Upon stopping, I left my truck to see what happened and saw smoke coming out from under the hood. While I was trying to find a solution, I heard a scream behind me. I looked and saw a person running across the road, wearing a blue shirt and some old brown corduroy pants. I looked at him, and seconds later, he was gone. He went into the woods. I got scared, so I closed the hood and quickly entered my truck. Some minutes later, I thought to myself, if the person wanted to harm me, they would probably just run toward me, not the forest, and would have already come close to me anyway. So I decided to go toward the spot he went. While I was in the middle of the road, closing in on the woods, I saw 4 people hiding in the bushes. I ran to my truck and quickly locked the doors. I called the police, and an officer arrived at the scene. I told him everything that happened, and he went on to examine the same bushes they were in. Seconds later, I saw him coming back with a person handcuffed. The cop told me he was most definitely on meth and passed out in a bush. I thanked him, and he told me to call a tow truck, leaving the area. So that's what I did. I waited in my truck until 10 minutes later, the tow truck arrived. The driver went to my window and asked me what had happened, to which I explained the whole situation. My insurance provides a ride for the driver of the towed vehicle, so I asked him if he would give me a ride. He agreed, but told me he could only carry 1 passenger. I said it was okay, since I was alone that night either way. He then pointed to my back seat and asked me who the person sitting behind me was. I looked behind me and saw a person, the same person that I had seen running across the road, sitting right behind me in the back seat. I got out of my truck, but as I did, I saw the man opening the opposite door, vanishing into the woods. Scared, I helped the tow truck driver tow my truck, and we quickly left the area. Upon arriving at the auto repair shop, the mechanic asked me if anything had struck the bottom of my truck or if I had recently tampered with the oil pan. I denied any interference, prompting the mechanic to tell me why. He then proceeded to tell me it was pierced, and by the look of the oil, it seemed to be recent. We talked for a little bit and I decided to go home. I called an Uber and got there in 15 minutes. The mechanics took about 5 days to fix my truck, and I, deciding to part ways with that old, unreliable vehicle, sold it a week later. Subsequently, I resigned from my job at the gas station 2 months later, saying goodbye to that unsettling workspace.